What are the merits of the Niners going out and getting another player?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's going to tell you that the 49ers feel like they're in contention, and we look at it as fans. It's interesting because we look at it as fans and we say, okay, well, you're 4-4, you're underachieving, the second half of the schedule is going to be tough. But when you look at it from an organizational standpoint, they want to make money first and foremost. The whole lemonade stand thing, like that's real. They want to make money. And when you are hiking up season ticket prices year over year, you want to show that you're still competitive. And when you go out and you make a trade, that gets people excited. That brings everybody back in. 4-4, all that's out the window. You're coming off a bye. You made a big trade. CMC's coming back. Drake Greenlaw's almost back. You get excitement back into that building and into that fan base. And I think that's the most important thing. You want to get this team, this fan base excited for the second half of the season. And making a big trade is certainly a way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this roster is not as good as it was last year, and there's some serious flaws. And if they're serious about winning the Super Bowl this year, if they really think they can do it, then I think adding a defensive lineman, a linebacker, both, I mean, it really couldn't hurt. They're thin at those positions. Adding a starter, an impact player would be great. And they did it last year. It would really signal to the fans and to the locker room that they're still serious. They're still all in. They haven't lost confidence, hope after a shaky start. It's what I mean, I'm skeptical. Put it this way. I'm skeptical they could win a Super Bowl without it. You could argue they can't. They may be beyond the point where where a trade could save them. But they just beat Dallas, Jesse.
Well, I will also say there's no bigger player that you're going to get at the trade deadline. Like, there's no player you're going to go get that's bigger than getting Greenlaw and CMC back. And I don't know that there's a team that's going to add a player that is bigger than either of those guys. So I know that you're not trading for CMC and you're not trading for Greenlaw. And who knows? They may not be what they were last year. That's very, very possible. But if they're anything close, you're adding players to your roster through injury that are coming back that are bigger than anything any other team has gone out and done. And so I think that right there is something that we have to focus on as well. Then if you do add a piece, it's like, think about it. This team's not as good as it was last year, but you could say, hey, it's simply because the roster hasn't been as good. But if you infuse CMC, Greenlaw, another player on the defensive line, why couldn't they be as good as they were last year? The secondary is better than it was last year. The offensive line is better than it was last year. Why not?
Okay, I get the sense that you don't think the Niners should be buyers at the deadline. Do you think they should stand pat? Do you think they should sell off a couple players? What do you think? Trade a couple players?
I don't think I think standing pat's the worst thing you can do, personally. I think you either got to be buyers or you got to be sellers. Standing pat is like the most pussyfoot way to say, like, well, we don't think we're necessarily contenders, but maybe, maybe. I don't think they can stand pat, and I don't think they will. I think they are going to be buyers. I personally said if they lost to the Chiefs, I would be a seller, but I also am not running an organization that's trying to make money, and making money, whether we want to believe it or not, is number one priority for the San Francisco 49ers and ownership. That's number one. And if you're going to sell season tickets for the next year, you've got to be competitive and make it into the playoffs this year. So they're not going to be sellers. They're looking at it from that standpoint. I'm looking at it from a standpoint of you're most likely not going to win a Super Bowl. You're not going to win a Super Bowl. Let's just leave it at that. You're not going to win a Super Bowl. And I don't want to set the franchise back an extra year. By not trading players now, you're rolling money into 2026, which makes it harder to retool on the fly. Versus if you sell now, then you can be contenders again in 2026 because all that money's off the books after next year. But organizations don't look at it that way. I understand why they don't look at it that way. But from just a pure football standpoint, I think selling would be the right move. There's no way they do that.
I'm with you on that. There's no way they do that. Just looking at how this organization has done business in the past, like look at last year. They were 5-3. They had lost 3 in a row. Their plan at the end was to give Drake Jackson a shot. It worked out week 1, but then it didn't work out ever again. and they made a move for Chase Young and hoped that he would put them over the top. So at 4-4, they know they're flawed on the D line. Leonard Floyd hasn't been what he's been the Drake Jackson of this year. He's not giving him much. Malik Collins is solid. Javon Hargrave is out. I'm not sure that they can pull off a trade for a defensive lineman, but it seems like something they have done in the past in under similar circumstances. And if they don't do it now, it's because either they don't have the money, which I mean they have the cap space, or they don't think they're really. They just don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl this year. And look, maybe it's possible, but just being in that locker room, I get the sense that this is a team that thinks McCaffrey's coming back and everything's going to be okay. Whether or not that's the truth. That's the hope.
It is hard to rely on that, but it also, like, just look at it from a team standpoint and being in the locker room. If you see CMC working out and you feel like, man, he looks explosive, he looks like he's going to be his old self, you can't really help but to get excited about that. This was the offensive player of the year. For my money, CMC should have been the MVP last year. Like, if there was any year in recent memory where a quarterback shouldn't have been MVP, it was last year. Period. Okay. Like, nobody had the stats and the record to back it up. CMC should have been in the MVP, or should have been the MVP. It's clearly a quarterback award, and running backs and other players don't really have a chance to win it. But CMC was that good last year. Now, if CMC comes
split the
back,
vote with Brock, that's what sunk him.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. That hurt him. That definitely hurt him. So,
because they were 3 and 4 in the voting.
Oh, good call.
Yeah.
Good call.
Yeah. So, although no one else got a first place vote other than Lamar. He got all the first place votes except for one. One went to Josh Allen. There's a lot of pressure to vote for Lamar. I don't know. You get called out if you don't.
Yeah, he was the unanimous the year that he won it, and then we'll see. We'll see what happens this year. But the point is that when you feel like you have a player that's going to be injected into your lineup like that, I mean, you can't help but to get excited. And truth be told, defenses, if he's not who he was last year, it's going to take a while for the league to recognize it. The league's still going to play him as if he's the offensive player of the year. He's going to get that respect, and deservedly so. And that's going to help out this offense no matter what. So whether he's the player he was last year or he wasn't, at least for a few games, you're going to be able to fool teams into thinking like, oh, it's CMC, until they realize he's not, assuming he can't get back up to speed, which, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to doubt CMC. I just think it's really, really hard to believe that he's going to be the same player after not playing any football for as long as it's been, coming off of 2 Achilles tendonitis issues. I don't know. We'll see.
Here's my prediction. The 49ers will trade for a player at the deadline.
Okay, I agree.
And that's going to be after this weekend's game. They could do it now, but I think by doing it next week, saves the Yorks a game check.
That's a good point. So
I think they're going to make a move on the 4th or the 5th, but we'll see.
I also think it gives you another week for teams that are like, well, we may be interested, but we want to see how this weekend goes. And a lot of teams that think they, we're close, maybe not, well, we got to see, they lose. And now all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're ready to sell. So there's probably multiple potential trades that are in the works, and they're waiting for teams to potentially lose this weekend, would be my guess.
Sir Cash Money says, if we want to make a trade for the D line, the Jags aren't going anywhere. Why don't we trade for that Armstead fellow? Well, we'll talk about the potential. Maybe they could trade for Chase Young too. Who knows? Yeah. Belichick 2024 says, Jesse, I know you're a little more plugged into fantasy. Grant plugged into the team. What are your expectations for CMC? And do you think Mason has a workload that would warrant playing him in fantasy if CMC is healthy?
I think it's a cluster. And I'm in that situation where I have CMC and I have Mason. It's the worst possible scenario. If CMC is going to play, I'm just playing him. Period.
But you don't really know if CMC is ever going to play again, or what that's going to look like, or how long he can keep it up. So I would hold on to Mason just in case.
For sure. Yes, I'm definitely handcuffing him with Mason.
That probably wasn't the question, though, in retrospect.
I think he wanted to play both, but I don't think both of them have enough value to play unless you're in a super deep league. Yeah,
I don't think so. Amaya says, Grant, have you ever given the poster in the back a second thought? Do you feel it draws unnecessary comparisons? Sorry, love you. Yeah, I have thought about that. I think it's kind of fitting for me, at least.